He'd been a billionaire once. Now he was just a man with calloused hands and a quiet heart trying to outrun memories in the shadow of the Rockies. Then she arrived, a woman searching for stories about love she no longer believed in. What they found instead would heal wounds neither knew they carried. Billionaire hid his poor cowboy until Ryder discovered his secret. Their love healed everything. The engine coughed once, twice, then died with a shudder that Margaret Thornton felt in her bones. No, 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 no. She turned the key again. The rental car's dashboard lights flickered weakly before fading to black. You have got to be kidding me. Outside the windows, Montana stretched in every direction, endless grassland rolling toward distant mountains, the kind of landscape that made you feel simultaneously insignificant and strangely at peace. At least that's what she would have written in one of her books. Right now, sitting in a dead car on a road that hadn't seen another vehicle in 40 minutes, Maggie felt neither insignificant nor peaceful. She felt annoyed. She pulled out her phone, saw him. No signal, of course not. Maggie pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and allowed herself exactly 10 seconds of frustration. She'd learned long ago that panic accomplished nothing. She was a woman who'd built a career on words, on controlling narratives, on making sense of chaos. A broken-down car was just another problem to solve. She grabbed her jacket from the passenger seat, checked that her emergency kit was in the trunk, and stepped out into the September afternoon. The silence hit her first. Not the absence of sound exactly, but the presence of a different kind of noise, wind moving through grass, the distant call of a hawk, the whisper of her own breathing. After 3 hours on the plane from New York and another 90 minutes driving from the airport, the quietness felt almost aggressive in its completeness. Maggie popped the hood more out of obligation than actual mechanical knowledge. She stared at the engine with the same helpless frustration she'd felt looking at her dishwasher's inner workings last month. Chrome and cables and mystery. Well, she said aloud to no one, at least the view is nice. And it was. The road cut through a valley floor with mountains rising like ancient sentinels on either side. Aspen trees were just beginning their autumn transformation, flashes of gold among the evergreens. The sky stretched impossibly blue, the kind of blue that didn't exist in Manhattan, where buildings and smog and a million stories competed for space. She was mentally calculating how long it would take to walk to the last town she'd passed, 15 miles, give or take, when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Maggie turned, shading her eyes against the sun. A rider approached from the east, moving at an easy canter across the open grassland. As he drew closer, she could make out details. A dark horse with a white blaze, a man in a worn cowboy hat, the kind of relaxed posture that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He slowed as he reached the fence line that ran parallel to the road, then guided his horse toward a gate about 50 yards down. Maggie watched him dismount with an economy of movement, open the gate, lead the horse through, close it behind him, all with the kind of deliberate care that suggested these actions had been performed 10,000 times before. He walked toward her, leading the horse. As he got closer, Maggie revised her first impression. This wasn't a young cowboy playing at ranch life. This was a man in his mid-60s, she guessed, with silver threading through dark hairlines etched deep around eyes that had spent decades squinting into sun and wind. He moved like someone comfortable in his own skin, no hurry, no performance. Afternoon, he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice carried the roughness of someone who spent more time talking to horses than people. Looks like you've got some trouble. That's one way to put it. Maggie gestured at the car. Engine died about 10 minutes ago. I don't suppose you are also a mechanic. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I can take a look, but I'm better with livestock than internal combustion engines. He dropped the horse's reins, ground-tied. Maggie realized the animal trained to stand without being tethered, and moved to peer under the hood. She watched his hands, scarred and sun-browned, move with surprising gentleness as he checked connections and cables. There was something mesmerizing about competence, she thought. Something honest about a man who knew how to actually do things, not just delegate them. When's the last time you checked your battery connections, he asked. I got the car from the rental agency yesterday. He made a non-committal sound, producing a multi-tool from his pocket and tightening something she couldn't see. Try it now. Maggie slid back into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine turned over immediately, purring to life as if it had never stopped. She stepped back out, genuinely impressed. How did you a loose connection on the positive terminal? Happens sometimes, especially on these rental fleet vehicles. They don't always maintain them as well as they should. He closed the hood, wiping his hands on his jeans. Should get you where you're going, but I'd have someone look at it properly once you reach town. I will. Thank you. Maggie extended her hand. Margaret Thornton. Maggie. His grip was firm, warm, his palm calloused against hers. Sam Mitchell, you headed to Prospect? I am. Is it much farther? About 12 miles up this road. You staying long? There was nothing intrusive about the question, just the natural curiosity of someone who lived in a place where strangers were noteworthy. A few weeks, maybe longer, Maggie said. I'm writing a book about modern ranch women, doing research. Something flickered in his eyes, interest maybe, or assessment. You're a writer. I am. She waited for the inevitable question about what she'd written, whether he'd heard of her, the awkward dance of recognition or lack thereof. But it didn't come. Instead, Sam said, well, you've come to the right place. Montana's full of stories. He gathered his horse's reins. You should find plenty of material in Prospect. Small town, but the people are genuine, most of them anyway. That's what I'm counting on. Maggie hesitated, then added, I really appreciate your help. If there's anything I can do to thank you. No need. He swung into the saddle with the ease of long practice, settling into the leather like it was a favorite chair. Welcome to Montana, Miss Thornton. Drive safe. He touched his hat brim again and turned the horse back toward the open land. Maggie watched him go, something about the encounter leaving her unsettled in a way she couldn't quite name. There'd been no flirtation, no agenda, just simple competence and courtesy. When was the last time she'd met someone with no apparent angle? She shook her head, climbed back into the car, and continued toward Prospect. But she found herself checking the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of horse and rider before they disappeared into the rolling landscape, becoming part of the Montana afternoon like they'd always been there. Prospect, Montana, population 847, looked like someone's romanticized idea of a western town that had somehow become real. Main Street stretched for exactly 4 blocks lined with brick buildings from the 1880s that wore their age with dignity. Maggie counted 2 cafes, a hardware store, a feed supply shop, a library that doubled as the community center, and a market that advertised everything you need and most of what you want. She pulled into the gravel lot beside the Red Creek Cafe, gathering her bag and notebook. The book research was real. She did need to interview ranch women for her publisher, but it also served as useful cover for the real reason she'd fled New York. Writer's block didn't begin to describe the creative paralysis that had gripped her for the past 6 months. How did you write about love when you'd stopped believing in it? The question haunted her every time she opened her laptop. M.R. Thornton, best-selling romance author, beloved by millions for her stories of passion and devotion and happily ever afters. If her readers knew the truth that she wrote about emotions she no longer trusted, that every word felt like a beautiful lie, they'd feel betrayed. Hell, she felt like a betrayer. The cafe's interior smelled like coffee and home cooking. Vintage photos of the town's history lined the walls, cowboys and cattle drives, and stern-faced pioneers. A handful of customers occupied the red vinyl booths, their conversations pausing as Maggie entered. Small-town attention, not hostile, just interested. Sit anywhere you like, honey, called a woman behind the counter. She was somewhere north of 70, with white hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes sharp as glass. Coffee, please. Maggie slid into a booth by the window, grateful for the caffeine and the chance to decompress. The waitress appeared with a pot and a mug, both ancient and somehow perfect. You're new. Is it that obvious? In a town this size, a sneeze is front-page news. She filled the mug with practiced ease. I'm Rose. This is my place, has been for 43 years. You just passing through, or do we get to keep you a while? There was something immediately likable about Rose's direct manner. No pretense, no performance. Keeping me a while, I hope. I'm renting a cabin, the Collins place. Oh, the old hunting cabin up near the Mitchell Ranch. Nice spot, quiet. Rose pulled an order pad from her apron. What brings you to Prospect, if you don't mind my asking? I'm a writer, researching a book about women and ranching. Rose's face lit up. Well, now, that's something different. Most folks come here for fishing or hunting, maybe some of that Wilderness therapy nonsense, but a book. What kind of book? Maggie had her standard answer prepared. I'm interested in how women are shaping modern ranch culture, the challenges they face, the innovations they're bringing, how they balance tradition with contemporary life. Hmm. Rose studied her with those sharp eyes. That the official answer or the real one? Maggie blinked, caught off guard by the perceptiveness. That is the real one. If you say so. Rose tapped her pen against the pad. I'll tell you what, honey. You want to understand ranch women, you should talk to Sarah Chen. She runs a cattle operation with her wife about 10 miles north. Revolutionary grazing techniques, whole thing. And Martha Jensen, she's been managing the Double J for 60 years since her husband died in a riding accident. Toughest woman in 3 counties. I can make some introductions if you're serious. I would appreciate that very much. Good. Now you want the meatloaf or the chicken fried steak? Both come with mashed potatoes and green beans, and both will stick to your ribs proper. Maggie ordered the meatloaf and spent the next hour eating comfort food while watching Prospect's citizens come and go. Rose worked the room like a conductor leading an orchestra, knowing everyone's order before they spoke, dispensing gossip and wisdom in equal measure. As Maggie was finishing her coffee, the door opened and Sam Mitchell walked in. He'd cleaned up since their roadside encounter, shed the dusty work clothes for clean jeans and a pressed button-down, though he still wore the same worn boots. His hair was damp, like he'd recently showered. He looked, Maggie thought, exactly like what he was, a working rancher at the end of a long day. Their eyes met across the cafe. Recognition flickered in his expression, followed by what might have been pleasure. Miss Thornton, he said, approaching her booth. Car still running. Like a dream. Thank you again for the rescue. Sam Mitchell, Rose said, appearing with a coffee pot. Don't you dare monopolize our visitor. This is Margaret Thornton. She's a writer doing a book about ranch women. We've met, Sam said. Sort of. On the road this afternoon. Have you now? Rose's eyes gleamed with interest. Well, isn't that convenient? Sam here knows just about every ranch family within 100 miles. Been here, 3 years now? About that, Sam agreed. Moved here from back east. Rose continued in the manner of someone delivering information she found significant. Bought the old Henderson place. Beautiful property. You run cattle, don't you, Sam? Some cattle, some horses, enough to keep me busy. Maggie sensed he was uncomfortable with the attention, though he hid it well. There was a natural reserve about him, a quietness that wasn't shyness so much as self-containment. Join me, Maggie said impulsively. Unless you're meeting someone. He hesitated for just a moment, then slid into the booth across from her. Just picking up dinner. Rose makes the best pot roast in Montana. Second best, Rose corrected. Martha Jensen's is better, but don't you dare tell her I said so. She disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving them alone. So, Maggie said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. You're originally from back east. Virginia a long time ago, New York, Manhattan. He nodded slowly as if this confirmed something. That's a big change city to hear. Needed a change of scenery. And the research is real. I am writing about ranch women. But I also needed. She paused, surprised by her own honesty. Space to think, I suppose. New York can be overwhelming. I understand that. Sam's fingers drummed once against the table, then stilled. That's part of why I came here. Too much noise back there. Not the sound kind, but the other kind. The constant demands, the expectations, the performance of it all. Maggie felt something click into place, a recognition of kindred experience. Yes, exactly that. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Maggie felt the strangest sensation, like she'd known this man before in some other context. Ridiculous, of course. She'd never been to Montana, and he clearly hadn't moved in her publishing circles. But the feeling persisted. How long are you staying? Sam asked. As long as it takes to get the book done. A month, maybe 6 weeks. That's good. You'll get to see the seasons change. September into October, when the aspens turn gold and the elk come down from the high country, there's nothing like it. The way he spoke about the land carried reverence, the tone of someone describing something sacred. It made Maggie want to see it through his eyes, to understand what had drawn him here, what kept him. Rose returned with a takeout bag. Here you go, Sam. Extra gravy, just how you like it. You spoil me, Rose. Someone has to. You spend too much time alone up on that ranch. She turned to Maggie. This one's a hermit. Good man works hard, but he's going to turn into a recluse if somebody doesn't remind him there's a world beyond his fence line. Sam stood pulling cash from his wallet. I'm not a hermit. I'm selective about my company. That's just a fancy way of saying hermit. Rose took his money and counted out change with gnarled fingers. You should take Maggie riding sometime, show her the real ranch country, for her research. Rose, Sam said, a note of warning in his voice. But Maggie found herself saying, actually, that would be helpful. I'd love to see a working ranch operation understand the daily rhythms. Sam looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded. All right, if you're serious, come by tomorrow morning. Early 6 o'clock. Dress warm and wear sturdy boots if you have them. I have them, and I'm serious. I'll text you directions. He paused. If that's all right. Maggie pulled a business card from her bag, scribbled her cell number on the back. Their fingers brushed as she handed it to him, and she felt that same spark of connection, brief and electric. 6 o'clock, she confirmed. 6 o'clock. He echoed, then tipped his hat to Rose and left. Rose watched him go with obvious satisfaction. Now that, she said, is a good man. Keeps to himself too much but solid. You could do worse for a tour guide. I'm here to work, Rose. Not to... Sure, honey, just so work. Rose's smile was knowing. That's what they all say. Maggie woke at 5:30 to darkness and silence, so complete she momentarily forgot where she was. Then memory returned the cabin Montana, the research trip that was both genuine and escape. She dressed in layers thermal underwear jeans, a flannel shirt, the fleece-lined jacket she'd bought specifically for this trip. Her hiking boots, broken in during walks through Central Park but never truly tested, felt sturdy as she laced them tight. At 5:45, she made coffee in the cabin's ancient percolator, drinking it black, while watching the sky slowly lighten through the kitchen window. The Collins cabin sat on a small parcel of land that bordered the Mitchell Ranch, Rose had explained. Once used for hunting season rentals, it had sat empty for the past 2 years until the owners decided to list it on a vacation rental site. Maggie had it for the next 6 weeks, assuming she could stand the isolation that long. Right now, standing in the pre-dawn quiet with steam rising from her mug, she thought she might manage just fine. Sam's directions led her down a dirt road that wound through pine forest before opening onto pasturelands. His ranch spread across a valley floor maybe 500 acres from what she could see, with mountains rising dramatic behind. The house was a low-slung log structure, clearly old but meticulously maintained. A barn and several outbuildings completed the picture, everything neat and orderly in the growing light. Sam emerged from the barn as she parked, leading 2 saddled horses. He dressed for work, canvas jacket chaps over his jeans gloves tucked into his belt. The practical uniform of someone who actually lived this life rather than cosplaying it. Morning, he called. Coffee in the thermos if you want it. I'm coffeeed out, but thank you. Maggie approached the horses cautiously. She'd ridden exactly 3 times in her life, all of them during a press junket to a dude ranch in Wyoming 15 years ago. I should probably mention that I'm not an experienced rider. These 2 could find their way home blindfolded in a snowstorm. You'll be fine. He handed her the reins of a stocky paint mare. This is Dolly. She's patient with beginners. Just sit deep, keep your heels down, and trust her to do most of the work. With Sam's help, Maggie mounted. The world looked different from horseback. Higher, wider, the horizon suddenly accessible in a way it hadn't been on foot. Dolly shifted beneath her, responding to weight and balance, and Maggie felt a flutter of nervousness. Relax, Sam said, swinging onto his horse with practiced ease. She can feel your tension. Breathe, you're not going to fall. Maggie consciously relaxed her shoulders, deepened her breathing. Dolly's ears swiveled back toward her, attentive. Better, Sam said. Ready. They set out across the pasture at a walk, the horses moving through the tall grass with the quiet purpose of animals who knew their work. Sam rode beside her, close enough to help if needed, but giving her space to find her seat. How long have you had this place? Maggie asked, when she felt confident enough to speak without concentrating entirely on not falling off. 3 years this past May. It had been empty for a while before that old bachelor rancher named Henderson ran it for 50 years, died without heirs. The land needed work when I bought it, fences down, pastures overgrazed, but the bones were good. And you knew how to ranch before you came here. He was quiet for a moment, and Maggie wondered if she'd overstepped. Then he said, I grew up on a small farm in Virginia. Worked it with my father until I was 18. Then I went a different direction for a long time. But you don't forget certain things, how to read the land, how to work with animals, how to mend what's broken. It came back. There was a story there, Maggie thought. The gap between 18 and his current age, the different direction he'd taken, the reasons for returning to this kind of life. But she didn't push. People revealed themselves in time or they didn't. She'd learned that from years of interviewing subjects for her books, the ones thinly disguised as fiction. They rode in comfortable silence, the sun climbing higher, burning off the morning chill. Sam pointed out landmarks, the creek where his property line ran, the ridge where elk bedded down in summer, the meadow where he'd put up hay earlier that month. He spoke about the land with the intimacy of a lover, knowing its moods and seasons, its gifts and challenges. You really love it here, Maggie said. I do. Simple, definitive. Spent too many years in places that didn't fit. This fits. They reached a high point overlooking the valley, and Sam dismounted, helping Maggie down with steady hands on her waist. Her legs felt wobbly after an hour in the saddle, muscles protesting the unfamiliar activity. Give it a minute, Sam said. Walking will help. They walked the horses to a flat rock that jutted out over the valley, offering a panoramic view. Maggie's breath caught. The morning sun illuminated everything. Grasslands rippling in the breeze, the silver thread of the Creek Mountains standing sentinel in the distance. It was the kind of beauty that made you understand why people wrote poems and songs, why they tried desperately to capture something that couldn't truly be captured, only experienced. My wife would have loved this, Sam said quietly. Maggie turned to him. He was looking out over the valley, his expression distant. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. We'd talked about retiring somewhere like this, getting away from the city, having some peace. But there was always one more year, one more project, one more reason to wait. His jaw tightened. Then there was no more time. I'm sorry, Maggie said, the words inadequate but sincere. I bought this place 6 months after her funeral. Sold everything, walked away from the life we'd built, and came here. People thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had a little, but I needed... He trailed off, searching for words. I needed to be somewhere she'd never been. Somewhere every street corner and restaurant and park bench didn't remind me of her. Does that make sense? Yes, Maggie said. It makes perfect sense. She understood grief's geography, how certain places could become unbearable with memory. Her own divorce had sent her fleeing her Connecticut house, the home she and Richard had shared for 15 years. Every room had echoed with arguments and silences and the slow death of affection. She'd moved to Manhattan, started over, built a new life from the wreckage of the old one. They stood together, watching the valley wake up, the horses grazing peacefully nearby. Maggie felt something shift between them, the connection deepening from polite acquaintance to something more substantial. Shared grief, perhaps, or the recognition that both of them carried losses that had shaped who they'd become. You mentioned yesterday that you came here for space to think, Sam said. What are you thinking about? The question was gentle, not prying, but it touched something raw. Maggie surprised herself by answering honestly. Whether I can keep doing what I do, whether I should. Writing, you mean, Ian, writing romance. Writing about love like it's this beautiful redemptive force when I'm not sure I believe that anymore. She laughed, but without humor. I've made a career selling hope to people, and I feel like a fraud. Why? Because I went through a divorce 10 years ago that showed me exactly how ugly love can become, how it can turn into resentment and recrimination and cruelty. My ex-husband had an affair with his assistant, cliché, I know, and when I found out, he told me I was cold, that I'd driven him to it with my ambition and my need to be right all the time. The words came faster now, pressured by years of silence. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was cold. Maybe I am. But I can't write convincingly about passion when all I remember is how it ended. Sam turned to look at her fully, his gray-blue eyes steady and direct. Do you think you're cold? I don't know anymore. I thought we were happy. I was happy. But I must have been blind to something. He needed something I wasn't giving. Otherwise, why would he have looked elsewhere? Or, Sam said carefully, He was a man who made a selfish choice and blamed you for it rather than take responsibility for his own character. That's also possible. Maggie blinked, thrown by his directness. You don't even know him. No, but I know the story. Man cheats, tells his wife it's her fault for not being enough. Tale as old as time, and it's usually horse shit. He said it without heat, just matter of fact. People who love you don't make you responsible for their failures. Something in Maggie's chest loosened a knot she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. He was very convincing. I'm sure he was. Cheaters usually are. They have to convince themselves first. Sam picked up a small stone, turned it over in his palm. My wife and I had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. Honest. When we fought fair. When we were wrong, we said so. When we hurt each other, we apologized and meant it. That's what love looks like in reality, not the romance novel version maybe, but the sustainable kind, the kind that lasts. Until death, Maggie said softly. Until death. He threw the stone out over the valley, watching it arc and fall, which comes for all of us eventually. But that doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means it wasn't permanent. Nothing is. They stood in silence, and Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time someone had listened to her like this without judgment or advice or the urge to fix her? When had she last felt permission to be uncertain, to be wounded, to be something other than the competent, successful woman she'd built her public identity around? Thank you, she said, for listening and for not telling me to just get over it or think positive or whatever platitude people usually offer. You're welcome. Sam checked his watch. We should head back. I've got fence repairs this afternoon, and you probably have research to do. As they rode back to the barn, Maggie found herself relaxing into the rhythm of Dolly's gait, her body learning the motion, the partnership between horse and rider. It felt good to be a beginner at something to be learning rather than performing expertise. Same time tomorrow, Sam asked as she dismounted, then immediately added, if you want to keep riding, I mean, for your research, or just because. I'd like that, Maggie said, and meant it. The routine established itself over the next week. Maggie would arrive at Sam's ranch at 6. They'd ride out into the morning, and he'd show her different aspects of ranch life. How to check cattle for illness, where the best grazing was, and how to rotate pastures. The names and behaviors of his small remuda of horses, each one with distinct personality and quirks. He was a patient teacher, never condescending, always willing to explain the why behind the what. Maggie found herself genuinely interested, taking notes not just for the book, but because the information itself fascinated her. There was a rhythm to ranch work, a connection to seasons and weather and animal needs that felt grounding in a way her New York life never had. Between the morning rides, she spent her days in town interviewing the women Rose had introduced her to. Sarah Chen talked about sustainable grazing practices and the challenges of being both queer and Asian in a predominantly white conservative ranching community. Martha Jensen shared stories of running the Double J after her husband's death, battling banks and neighbors who assumed a woman couldn't manage a cattle operation. The material was good, better than good. Real voices, real struggles, real triumphs. Maggie's notebook filled with quotes and observations, the bones of what could become an honest, important book. But her evenings back at the cabin, she found herself writing something else. Not the research book, not even another romance novel, just fragments, impressions of the land, character, sketches, emotional explorations. The kind of writing she'd done before she'd become M.R. Thornton best-selling author, before writing had become product and deadline and brand management. On the 8th morning, Maggie arrived to find Sam in the barn, working with a young horse on a lunge line. The animal, a 3-year-old buckskin gelding, moved in circles around him, responding to subtle cues from Sam's body language and voice. He's beautiful, Maggie said, leaning against the fence. And stubborn. His owner wants him started under saddle by November, but he's got opinions about everything. Sam brought the horse to a halt, rewarding him with a scratch on the withers. Morning, no riding today. I need to work with this guy, but you're welcome to watch if you're interested. I am. She settled onto the fence rail and watched Sam work. It was, she realized, a kind of conversation, Sam asking questions with his posture and tone, the horse answering with his movement and attention. When the horse did something right, Sam released the pressure, immediately letting him rest. When the horse resisted, Sam waited him out with patient persistence, never forcing, never losing his temper. You're good at this, Maggie observed during one of the rest periods. It's about understanding what motivates them. Horses are herd animals. They want leadership, but they also want partnership. If you try to dominate through force, you just create fear. If you offer nothing, they won't respect you. The balance is finding that middle ground where you're the leader, but they're choosing to follow. Sounds like good relationship advice generally. Sam smiled. I suppose it does. After an hour, he turned the buckskin loose in the paddock and joined Maggie on the fence. They sat side by side, shoulders nearly touching, watching the horse roll in the dust. How's the research going? Sam asked. Really well. The women here are remarkable, strong, innovative, doing incredible things against significant odds. But, she glanced at him, what makes you think there's a but? You got a certain tone, like you're giving the expected answer rather than the whole truth. Maggie laughed, surprised by his perceptiveness. You're right, the research is great, but I'm also writing other things. Personal things. I don't know what they are yet or what they'll become, but they feel more honest than anything I've written in years. That's good, snit. Maybe, or maybe it's self-indulgent nonsense that'll never see the light of day. Can it be both? Can't something be personal and valuable at the same time? She considered this. I suppose it can. I've just spent so long writing for an audience, thinking about what sells, what my publisher wants, what my readers expect. The idea of writing just for myself feels almost selfish. I don't think finding your own voice is selfish. Sam pulled off his work gloves, tucked them in his back pocket. When I left Virginia, left the life I'd built there, people told me I was being selfish, running away from responsibility, abandoning my commitments. Maybe they were right. But I also knew I'd die if I stayed, maybe not physically, though I wasn't certain about that either, but definitely spiritually. Sometimes you have to choose yourself. What were you running from? The question slipped out before Maggie could stop it. I'm sorry, that's too personal. It's all right. He was quiet for a long moment, and Maggie thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, expectations. My own and everyone else's. I spent 40 years being who I was supposed to be, doing what I was supposed to do, achieving what I was supposed to achieve. And when my wife died, all of that just shattered. None of it mattered anymore. The career, the success, the approval, all of it felt hollow. So I walked away. Do you regret it? Not for a second. This life, he gestured at the ranch of the mountains beyond. It's real. It's mine. Nobody expects anything from me except the animals, and they just want food and water and kindness. I can live with that. Maggie felt a pang of envy. Must be nice to just start over. You could, if you wanted. I'm 62, Sam. Starting over feels like a young person's game. He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. You think I'm young, I'm 65. If anything, we're running out of time to waste on things that don't matter. The truth of it hit her like cold water. How many years did she have left? 20, if she was lucky. 30, if genetics and health insurance cooperated. Did she really want to spend them writing books she didn't believe in, performing a version of herself that felt increasingly false? You make a compelling argument, she said quietly. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Just saying if you want to change a direction, age isn't the barrier. Fear is. And you're not afraid, terrified every day. But I'd rather be scared doing something that matters than comfortable doing something that doesn't. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, warming the air, burning away the morning chill. Maggie felt something settling in her chest, a decision not yet fully formed, but taking shape. You want coffee? Sam asked. Real coffee, not the trail stuff. I make a decent pot. I'd love that. They walked to the house and Maggie stepped inside for the first time. The interior matched the exterior: log walls, stone fireplace, furniture that was simple but well made. Books lined one wall, an eclectic collection, ranching manuals next to philosophy texts, classic literature beside contemporary memoirs. A guitar sat in one corner, well used from the look of it. You play? Maggie asked, nodding toward the instrument. Badly, but it helps me think. Sam moved to the kitchen, filling a percolator with water and grounds. My wife used to say I had two modes working in music. Everything else was just killing time between the two. She sounds like she understood you. She did. better than I understood myself most of the time. The sadness in his voice was gentle now, worn smooth by 3 years of grief. We were together 38 years, met in college, married young, grew up together. When she died, I had to figure out who I was without her. Turned out I didn't really know. And now I'm learning slowly. The coffee began to percolate, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. What about you? How long ago was your divorce? 10 years, long enough that people expect me to be over it. Are you? I'm over him, but I'm not over what it did to my ability to trust, to believe in the narratives I sell for a living. Sam pulled 2 mugs from the cupboard, poured coffee. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe skepticism makes you a better writer, more honest. Or maybe it makes me a fraud. I don't think so. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent a small jolt through her, unexpected and electric. From his expression, Sam felt it too. I think it makes you human, and humans contain multitudes. You can doubt love and still write about it. You can be wounded and still hope for healing. Those contradictions don't make you fake. They make you complex. Maggie looked at him over the rim of her mug, this man who'd appeared in her life a week ago and somehow felt essential already. There was something happening here, something beyond friendship or professional courtesy. She could feel it in the air between them, in the way they'd begun to gravitate toward each other, in the conversations that went deeper than surface pleasantries. It terrified her. I should go, she said abruptly. Let you get back to work. If Sam was disappointed, he hid it well. All right, same time tomorrow. Actually, I have interviews scheduled the next few days. Driving out to Sarah Chen's ranch tomorrow, then Martha Jensen's place the day after. That's good. They'll give you great material. But maybe Friday if you're free. Friday works. His smile was warm, genuine. I'll plan a longer ride. There's a canyon I'd like to show you. I'd like that. As Maggie drove back to the cabin, she found herself trembling slightly. Not from cold or caffeine, but from the recognition of something she'd thought dead inside her. Want, interest, the terrifying possibility of connection. She'd come to Montana to hide. Instead, she was being found. Sarah Chen's ranch operation was exactly what Maggie needed to see. Innovative rotational grazing heritage breed cattle, a thriving farm-to-table beef business that connected directly with restaurants and consumers. Sarah and her wife Linda had built something remarkable, doing it their way, despite considerable resistance from the traditional ranching community. We're still the lesbian ranch to some folks, Sarah said, as they walked the pastures checking cattle. Like that's our defining characteristic, instead of the quality of our beef or our land management practices. But it's getting better, slowly. Maggie filled pages with notes, but her mind kept wandering to Sam. The way he listened, the depth in his gray-blue eyes, the gentleness of his hands with the horses. The way she'd felt when their fingers touched over the coffee mugs. You're thinking about someone, Sarah said, grinning. Maggie startled. What number? Honey, I've been with Linda for 20 years. I recognize that look. Who is he? There's no he. I barely know anyone here. Sam Mitchell, I'm guessing. Rose mentioned you've been riding with him. For research. He's been kind enough to show me ranch operations. Uh-huh. And that flush in your cheeks is purely from the Montana sun, I'm sure. Maggie felt herself redden further. It's not like that. We talk, that's all. Talking is how it starts. Sarah's expression gentled. He's a good man from what I know. Keeps to himself, but decent. Lost his wife a few years back. Tragic. He mentioned that. Did he mention what he did before moving here? Maggie paused. He said he'd gone a different direction from ranching. Didn't elaborate. Interesting. Sarah checked a tag on one of the cows, made a note on her phone. People come to Montana for different reasons. Some are running to something. Some are running from something. I wonder which one Sam is. The question stayed with Maggie. That evening, alone in the cabin, she found herself Googling Sam Mitchell, Virginia. The results were overwhelming. Thousands of Sam Mitchells, none of them clearly the man she'd been riding with every morning. She tried different combinations. Sam Mitchell, Ranch, Montana. Samuel Mitchell, Virginia Farm. Nothing useful appeared. It was like he'd emerged from thin air 3 years ago. No digital footprint, no past. which was impossible in the modern age. Everyone left traces, unless you worked very hard not to. Maggie closed her laptop, feeling guilty for snooping. If Sam wanted to share his past, he would. She had no right to dig into it behind his back. But curiosity gnawed at her. Not because she distrusted him, she didn't, which was surprising in itself, but because she wanted to know him, wanted to understand what had shaped him, what had brought him to this place, what kept him here in relative isolation. The next day at Martha Jensen's Double J Ranch, Maggie found herself similarly distracted. Martha was a force of nature, 84 years old, still riding fence lines and managing an operation that ran 600 head of cattle. Her story should have commanded Maggie's full attention. Instead, Maggie kept checking her phone, hoping for a text from Sam, even though they had no plans until Friday. "You got a man waiting on you?" Martha asked shrewdly. "No, well, maybe, I don't know." Maggie set down her phone. "I'm sorry, I'm being rude. You're being human. Though I will say at our age, we don't have time to waste on I don't know. You like him or you don't. He's worth your time, or he isn't. The rest is just fear talking." When did everyone in Montana become a relationship counselor? Martha laughed, a sound like gravel in a barrel. "Small town, honey. Romance is spectator sport. Plus, we're all invested in Sam finding someone. He's too good a man to spend his life alone." Note up on that ranch. "We're friends, that's all." "For now," Martha said. "But friendship's not a bad place to start. Better than lust anyway. That burns out quick. Friendship lasts." Friday morning arrived, cool and clear autumn, asserting itself in the crisp air and the deepening gold of the aspens. Maggie dressed carefully, not for fashion, but for function and comfort. Still, she found herself checking her reflection in the cabin's bathroom mirror, noting the way the rose-colored fleece brought out the color in her cheeks, how her auburn gray hair looked healthier after a week of Montana air. She was acting like a teenager before a first date. Ridiculous. But when she pulled up to Sam's ranch and saw him waiting by the barn, 2 horses saddled and ready, her heart did something complicated in her chest that felt suspiciously like anticipation. "Morning," he said, and his smile reached his eyes in a way that made her breath catch. "Ready for the canyon. Lead the way." They rode east, following a trail that climbed through pine forest and emerged onto a ridgeline overlooking a deep canyon. The walls were striated stone in shades of red and gold, carved by millennia of water and wind. Far below, a creek threaded silver through the canyon floor. "This is public land," Sam explained as they dismounted. "Bureau of Land Management. Technically, anyone can come here, but most people don't know about it. Too far from the main roads." They stood at the canyon rim, horses grazing peacefully nearby, the world spread out before them in layers of stone and sky and distance. Maggie felt something in her chest expand, making room for beauty she hadn't known she'd been craving. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said softly. "I wanted you to see it. It's one of my favorite places." Sam turned to her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her pulse quicken. "Maggie, I need to tell you something." Her stomach tightened. "All right." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "I haven't been entirely honest with you about who I was before I came here." "Okay." She kept her voice neutral, though her mind raced with possibilities. "I told you I went a different direction from farming." "That's true, but it's also an understatement. I built a company, energy sector, started in my 20s, grew it into something significant. Very significant. I was successful by any measure financially, professionally. CEO of a corporation with thousands of employees, operations in 15 countries. Maggie stared at him. "You were a CEO? "Oh, I was. Samuel Mitchell. Mitchell Energy Corporation. You can Google it if you want. The information's all there. I sold the company 3 months after my wife died, walked away with more money than I'll ever need, and came here to disappear." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because everyone who knows that part of my life treats me differently. They see dollar signs or opportunity or someone who can solve their problems with a checkbook. They don't see me, just what I have." His hands clenched, relaxed. "When I met you, you had no idea who I was. You didn't care about my past or my money. You just talked to me like I was human." It was such a relief, and I got selfish. I wanted to keep that, even though I knew it meant I was lying by omission. Maggie tried to process this. Sam Mitchell, the quiet rancher who fixed her car and taught her to ride had been a billionaire. Was still a billionaire technically, though apparently living like he wasn't. Say something, Sam said quietly. I'm trying to reconcile what you just told me with the man I've gotten to know. They're the same person. The ranch isn't an act. This life, it's the most honest thing I've ever done. More honest than anything I did in that CEO office. And the ranch, is it really struggling? Or was that part of the performance? He flinched. It's really struggling. I bought it with the intention of running it properly, not as some rich man's hobby. I don't use the money from before I have it managed by a foundation, giving it away mostly. The ranch has to support itself, which means it's subject to the same challenges as any other small operation. Drought equipment costs fluctuating beef prices. I'm not poverty cosplaying. I'm just refusing to use wealth I no longer feel I earn to solve every problem. That's either very principled or very stubborn. Probably both. A small smile. I know this changes things between us. How you see me, and I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. Maggie walked to the canyon edge trying to sort through her feelings. Was she angry, hurt? She examined the emotions honestly and found something surprising relief. She turned back to Sam. I've been keeping something from you, too, about who I am professionally. Now it was his turn to look wary. All right. I write under a pseudonym, M.R. Thornton, romance novels. Bestsellers, multiple awards, millions of copies sold. I'm not famous, but in certain circles, my name carries weight. And I came here not just for research on ranch women, but because I couldn't face my publisher and admit I don't know how to write the next book, that I've lost faith in my own genre. Sam processed this, then laughed, startled and genuine. So we're both hiding from successful careers we didn't want anymore. Apparently. Maggie felt her own laughter bubble up. God, we're ridiculous. We really are. He crossed to her, stopped, just close enough that she could feel his warmth. Does it change anything knowing? Does it for you? No, you're still the woman who gets up at 5:30 to ride horses with a stranger, who listens when I talk about training techniques and fence repair, who writes in her notebook like every word matters. The M.R. Thornton part is just your history, like the CEO part is mine. Then no, Maggie said, it doesn't change anything for me either. They stood looking at each other, and Maggie felt the air between them charged with something new. Not just friendship, not just attraction, but recognition. Two people who'd shed their old skins and were trying to figure out who they were underneath. Two people brave enough to start over, scared enough to hide, honest enough now to be seen. Sam reached up slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his hand curved against her cheek, calloused and warm. Can I kiss you? The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying and exactly right. Yes, Maggie whispered. He leaned in with exquisite slowness, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, a question, not a demand. Maggie's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart beating strong beneath the worn cotton of his shirt. The kiss deepened, still tender, but with heat building beneath. It had been so long since Maggie had been kissing like this, like she was precious, like the person kissing her had all the time in the world and wanted to spend it learning the shape of her mouth, the taste of her breath. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing unsteadily, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I'm too old for this, he murmured. My heart can't take it. You're not that old. I'm 65 and I feel like a teenager. It's undignified. Maggie laughed, her hands still resting on his chest. What do we do now? I don't know. I haven't done this in 4 decades. The rules have probably changed. I think we make our own rules. That sounds terrifying. It really does. They stood together, holding each other, while the canyon wind whispered around them and the horses dozed in the afternoon sun. Maggie felt something shifting in her chest, a thawing she hadn't expected. She'd come to Montana believing love was a lie she'd been selling. But this Sam's arms around her, his steady heartbeat under her palm, the simple honesty of two wounded people reaching for connection, this felt more real than anything she'd written in 20 years. Maybe love wasn't the fairy tale. Maybe it was this messy and middle-aged and scared, but willing to try anyway. We should probably head back, Sam said, though he made no move to release her. Probably. Neither of them moved. Maggie, yes, I'm glad you came to Montana. She pulled back enough to see his face, saw the vulnerability there, the hope he was trying to hide and failing. So am I. They rode back as the sun began its descent, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose. Maggie felt lighter than she had in months, despite the uncertainty of what came next. Or maybe because of it, uncertainty meant possibility. Possibility meant she wasn't finished yet. At the barn, as she dismounted and helped unsaddle Dolly, Sam said, "Dinner tomorrow. There's a steakhouse in town. Nothing fancy, but the food's good." "Are you asking me on a date?" "I'm asking you to dinner. Whether it's a date is up to you." Maggie smiled. "Then yes, it's a date." She drove back to the cabin as twilight settled over the valley, and for the first time since arriving in Montana, she opened her laptop and wrote. Not research notes, not tortured attempts at her romance novel, just words honest and raw about a woman who'd stopped believing in love and a man who'd lost it in the strange grace of finding each other in the wilderness. The words flowed like water, and Maggie wrote until midnight, her fingers flying across the keys, her heart cracking open, letting the story pour out. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. Somewhere in the valley, Sam was probably reading or playing his guitar, settling into his evening routine. Tomorrow they'd have dinner. Tomorrow they'd take another step into this strange, wonderful, terrifying thing growing between them. But tonight, Maggie just wrote, and it felt like coming home. The steakhouse, the cattleman's pride, occupied a renovated barn on the edge of town, all exposed beams and mason jar lighting. Maggie arrived 10 minutes early, nervous in a way she hadn't been since her 20s. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on dark jeans, a silk blouse the color of sage, and the silver earrings her daughter had given her years ago. Sam was already there standing when she entered. He'd traded his work clothes for pressed khakis and a navy button-down that made his eyes look more blue than gray. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he smelled faintly of cedar and something citrus. "You look beautiful," he said, and the simple sincerity of it made Maggie's chest tighten. "You clean up pretty well yourself." They settled into a corner booth, the kind of privacy that small towns afforded their residents when romance was in the air. The waitress, a young woman named Becky, who couldn't have been more than 25, brought water and menus with a knowing smile. "Nice to see you out with company, Mr. Mitchell. The usual, please, and whatever the lady would like." Maggie ordered the trout, and as Becky disappeared toward the kitchen, she caught Sam watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked. "I'm just thinking how surreal this is. A week ago, you were a stranger whose car broke down. Now you're the person I most want to talk to at the end of the day. That's either very romantic or slightly concerning, given how few people you talk to." He laughed. "Fair point, but the sentiment stands." They talked easily through dinner about the ranch, about Maggie's interviews, about books and music, and the small observations that made up daily life. Sam told her about the buckskin gelding's progress. Maggie shared Martha Jensen's story about fighting off a bear with a shovel in 1973. It felt natural, this conversation, like they'd been doing it for years rather than days. Over coffee, Sam's expression grew more serious. "I've been thinking about what I told you yesterday, about my past. And I want you to know that I meant what I said, about this life being more real than anything before. But I also want to be completely honest about something." Maggie set down her cup, giving him her full attention. "The ranch is in trouble. Real trouble. I've got about 6 months before I'll have to make some hard decisions. The drought this summer killed my hay crop, and I had to buy feed at prices that nearly wiped out my operating budget. I've got equipment that needs replacing and repairs I can't afford. The cattle prices are down, and I'm looking at a winter where I might not be able to keep everything running." "Can't you?" Maggie caught herself. "I'm sorry, that's not my business. You were going to ask why I don't use the money from before." It wasn't a question. "Because the moment I do that, this stops being a real ranch and starts being a vanity project. A rich man's toy. And I'll have proven everyone right that I can't actually do this, that I was just playing cowboy, that I needed my fortune to save me." That's pride talking. I know, my wife used to call it my fatal flaw. The inability to ask for help, to admit when I'm in over my head. His jaw tightened. "But I also know that if I bail myself out with money I didn't earn through this work, I'll never know if I could have made it on my own merit." Maggie understood the impulse, even as she recognized the stubbornness in it. What will you do? I don't know yet. Maybe sell some of the land, downsize the operation. Maybe take on a partner. Maybe accept that I failed and move on to something else. He met her eyes. But I wanted you to know, before this, he gestured between them, goes any further, I'm not the stable, successful rancher I might appear to be. I'm a 65-year-old man who walked away from one life and might be failing at building another. Sam, Maggie said gently, I'm a 62-year-old woman who built a career selling fantasies she doesn't believe in anymore. I think we're both just people trying to figure out what comes next. That doesn't make you a failure. It makes you human. Something in his expression softened. How did you get so wise? 10 years of therapy and a really good divorce attorney. He laughed and the tension broke. They finished their coffee and Sam paid despite Maggie's protests. As they walked out into the cool September night, he offered his hand. She took it, their fingers interlacing naturally. Walk with me, he asked. They strolled down Main Street, past darkened storefronts, and the few businesses still lit the bar, where country music drifted through open doors, the ice cream shop where teenagers clustered around picnic tables. A few people called greetings to Sam, their eyes lingering curiously on Maggie. Small town, Sam said apologetically. We're going to be the talk of the coffee shop tomorrow. Let them talk. I don't care. They reached the town park, a small green space with ancient cottonwoods and a gazebo that probably hosted summer concerts. Sam led her to a bench overlooking a pond where ducks settled in for the night. I should tell you something else, Maggie said, about why I'm really here. I thought you were researching ranch women. I am, but that's the excuse, not the reason. She took a breath, let it out slowly. My publisher gave me a deadline 6 months ago. New book, same formula, as always, plucky heroine, mysterious hero. Obstacles overcome, happy ending, guaranteed. And I sat down to write it and I couldn't. Every word felt like a lie. Every scene felt manufactured. I realized I'd been writing the same story for 20 years, just changing the names and settings, selling hope to people, while feeling increasingly hollow inside. Sam's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, silent encouragement. My agent called it a creative slump. My publisher suggested I take a break, do some research, get inspired. But it's not a slump, it's a crisis of faith. How do I write about love conquering all when I don't believe it does? How do I promise readers their happy ending when I'm not sure those exist? Do you think they don't exist? Or do you think yours didn't and you're afraid to try again? The question hit harder than Maggie expected. I don't know, maybe both. My wife and I had 38 years, Sam said quietly. It wasn't perfect, but it was good, real, and it ended because she died, not because we stopped loving each other. So I know happy endings are possible, they just don't last forever. Nothing does. Then what's the point? The point is the time you have, the moments of connection, of understanding, of seeing and being seen. The point is that for whatever time you get, whether it's 5 years or 50, you're less alone. You matter to someone. They matter to you. That's worth something, even if it ends. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. My marriage didn't end because someone died. It ended because my husband chose someone else, and he blamed me for it. Made me believe I was too cold, too ambitious, too much, and not enough all at once. How do I trust my judgment about love when I was so wrong before Bo? You weren't wrong. He was a coward who couldn't take responsibility for his choices. That's not a failure of your judgment. That's a failure of his character. You sound very certain. I am certain because I see you, Maggie. I see how you listen, really listen when people talk. How you care about getting the stories right, about doing justice to the women you're interviewing. How you show up every morning even though you're sore from writing and you'd probably rather sleep in. How you're willing to sit with uncertainty and keep trying anyway. That's not a cold woman. That's a brave one. The tears spilled over, and Maggie didn't try to stop them. Sam pulled her against his chest, his arms solid and warm around her, and she let herself cry for the marriage that had failed, for the years she'd spent doubting herself, for the fear that she'd never trust anyone again. When the tears finally subsided, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm sorry, that wasn't very attractive. It was human. I'll take human over attractive any day. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. Thank you for trusting me with that. Thank you for listening. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Maggie felt something settling in her chest, a sense of rightness she hadn't experienced in years. This man, this moment, this strange new possibility of something real. Maggie, can I take you home to my place, I mean? Just to talk, have some tea, maybe play you something on the glider. No expectations, no pressure, just more time together. She should probably say no. It was too soon, too fast, too risky. But when she looked at Sam's face open and hopeful and slightly terrified, she found herself nodding. Yes, I'd like that. Sam's living room looked different at night. The fire he'd built cast dancing shadows on the log walls, making the space feel intimate and safe. Maggie curled into one corner of the worn leather couch while Sam made tea in the kitchen. The domestic sounds, kettle whistling, cups clinking, cabinet doors closing somehow. Soothing. He returned with 2 mugs of chamomile, handing her one before settling at the other end of the couch. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence, his warmth. Do you want music? He asked. Only if you want to play. He retrieved the guitar, cradling it with the same gentleness he showed the horses. I'm not very good, and I mostly know sad old songs. Sad old songs are my favorite. He began to play something slow and melancholic, his fingers finding the chords with practiced ease, even as he claimed not to be skilled. His voice when he started singing was rough but honest, delivering lyrics about lost love and empty highways and the weight of memory. Maggie closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. It had been so long since anyone had played for her like this. Richard had been tone-deaf, dismissive of what he called artistic pretensions. But this wasn't pretentious. This was real, a man expressing emotions through the only language that felt adequate. When the song ended, silence filled the space between notes. That was beautiful, Maggie said softly. It's Townes Van Zandt, If I Needed You. My wife loved it. He set the guitar aside carefully. I couldn't listen to music for the first year after she died. It hurt too much. But eventually I realized that cutting myself off from it meant cutting myself off from good memories too. So I started playing again. Slowly. What was she like, your wife? Sam's expression grew distant but not pained. Smart, wickedly funny, patient with my workaholic tendencies, but she'd call me out when I took it too far. She was a teacher, high school English. Loved books almost as much as she loved pointing out when I was being an idiot. She sounds wonderful. She was. We had the kind of partnership where we made each other better. I was so driven, so focused on building the company, and she kept me grounded. Reminded me there was more to life than quarterly earnings and board meetings. I wish I'd listened to her more. Do you think she'd approve of this, of you being here starting over? I think she'd say it's about damn time I stopped punishing myself. He smiled, sad but genuine. She made me promise near the end that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life in mourning, that I'd let myself be happy again. I didn't believe it was possible then, but maybe it is, with the right person. The air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Maggie set down her tea, her hands suddenly unsteady. Sam, I need to be honest with you about something. All right. I'm terrified. Of this, of us, of feeling something again. My divorce didn't just hurt. It fundamentally changed how I see relationships. I spent 15 years with someone I thought I knew, and it turned out I didn't know him at all. Or maybe I did, and I just refused to see it. Either way, my judgment failed. So how do I trust myself now? You don't have to trust yourself, Sam said. You just have to trust me. And I know that's asking a lot, especially this early. But I can promise you this, I will never lie to you. I will never make you guess what I'm thinking or feeling. I will never punish you for being successful or ambitious or wanting things. And if I ever hurt you, it'll be by accident, not design, and I'll own it. That's a big promise. I'm a big believer in clear communication. Comes from running a corporation where vague directives cost millions. I'd rather be direct and risk awkwardness than play games and create confusion. Maggie felt something in her chest loosen. I can work with direct. Good. He shifted slightly closer. Then I'll be direct now. I'm falling for you, Maggie. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I wake up thinking about our morning rides, and I go to bed thinking about what we talked about and I can't remember the last time I felt this alive. You scare the hell out of me, but in the best possible way." Her breath caught. "Sam, you don't have to say anything back. I just wanted you to know where I stand, so you're not guessing or wondering or trying to read signals. I'm interested, very interested, and I'm willing to go as slow as you need to feel safe." Maggie looked at this man who'd appeared in her life barely a week ago and somehow felt essential. At his open face, his honest eyes, the vulnerability he wore without shame. She thought about Richard, who'd hidden and hedged and blamed. She thought about the years she'd spent second-guessing herself, convinced she was the problem. And she thought about the possibility, terrifying and exhilarating, of trying again. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered, "and it scares me to death. Good scared or bad scared? I don't know yet. Maybe both." Sam reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Then let's be scared together and figure it out as we go." They sat like that, hands joined, the fire crackling, the night deepening outside. Maggie felt herself relaxing into the moment, into the simple pleasure of connection. No performance, no pretense, just two people being honest about their feelings and their fears. After a while, she shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, and they stayed that way, watching the fire burn down to embers, neither wanting to break the spell by moving. Eventually, Maggie glanced at her watch. Nearly midnight. "I should go," she said, though she made no move to stand. "You could stay," Sam offered, then quickly added, "in the guest room." "I just meant it's late and the drive back to the cabin in the dark." "Sam, yes. I'd like to stay, but not in the guest room." She felt him tense, then relax. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm willing to try anyway." He turned to face her fully, his hand cupping her cheek. "We don't have to do anything. We can just sleep, just be together." "I know, but I want more than that. With you." She took a shaky breath. "I want to feel something real again, even if it's scary." Sam leaned in, kissing her with a tenderness that made her throat tight. When he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "Slow, we go slow." "Slow," she agreed. He stood, offering his hand. She took it, and he led her through the house to his bedroom. The space was simple, a large bed with a log frame, more bookshelves, a window overlooking the dark valley. He lit a small lamp on the nightstand, casting soft light. "I'm nervous," he admitted. "It's been 3 years since, and even before that, it was only ever with my wife. I'm not sure I remember how to do this with someone new." "I'm nervous too. It's been 10 years for me. And even then, toward the end, it wasn't." She trailed off. "Let's just go slow. Figure it out together." They undressed with shy hesitancy, neither rushing, both hyper-aware of the other's presence. When they stood facing each other, Maggie cataloged the differences between this body and the ones she'd written about in her novels. Sam wasn't the idealized hero with perfect muscles. He was a real man, skin showing the effects of age and a scar across his ribs from some past surgery, the slight softness of a belly that had once been harder. And he was beautiful because he was real. "You're beautiful," he said, echoing her thoughts. His eyes traced her body, the lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her hair, the body that had borne children and weathered decades. "God, you're beautiful." Maggie felt tears threaten again. When was the last time someone had looked at her like this? Like she was enough, just as she was. They came together slowly, learning the geography of each other's bodies, discovering what made the other sire shiver. Sam's hands were gentle, reverent, asking permission with every touch. Maggie let herself be vulnerable in a way she hadn't in years, trusting him with her imperfect body and her scarred heart. When they finally came together, it was sweet and awkward and real. Not the polished scenes from her novels, but better, messy and human and full of genuine emotion. They laughed when something didn't work quite right, adjusted, tried again. They whispered encouragement and checked in and took their time. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the lamplight, both breathing hard and slightly stunned, Maggie felt something she hadn't experienced in a decade. Hope. "That was," Sam started, then laughed. "I don't have words." "Me neither. And I'm a writer." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "Stay. Tonight. Please." "I will." They settled into the quiet comfort of being together, skin against skin, heartbeats gradually slowing. Outside, the Montana night wrapped around the ranch dark and vast and peaceful. Sam, Maggie murmured, half asleep. Thank you for seeing me, for making me feel safe enough to try. Thank you for trying, for being brave. They drifted off together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Maggie's sleep was dreamless and deep. Maggie woke to golden light streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting from another room. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place where she was. Then memory returned Sam's bedroom the night before the feeling of connection she'd thought lost forever. She sat up pulling the sheet around herself and found a note on the nightstand in Sam's neat handwriting. Coffee's ready. Take your time. I'm in the barn if you need me. No pressure, no expectations. Just glad you're here. Simple, direct, exactly what she needed. Maggie showered in Sam's bathroom using his soap that smelled like cedar, borrowing his comb. She dressed in yesterday's clothes, feeling simultaneously self-conscious and content. When she made her way to the kitchen, she found the promised coffee and a simple breakfast, laid out toast, jam, sliced fruit. Through the window, she could see Sam in the paddock working with the buckskin gelding. The horse was saddled now, and Sam was taking him through groundwork exercises, patient and methodical. She poured coffee and stood watching, marveling at his competence, his gentle strength. Her phone buzzed. Multiple texts from her agent increasingly frantic. Maggie, where are you with the manuscript? Publisher is getting nervous. They need pages. Please call me. We need to discuss options. Guilt washed over her. She'd been in Montana for 2 weeks and hadn't written a single word of the book she was contractually obligated to deliver. Instead, she'd been filling notebooks with observations about ranch life, character sketches of the women she'd interviewed, and fragments of something that might be a different kind of story entirely. She typed back, still researching, making progress. We'll call next week. It wasn't entirely a lie. She was making progress, just not on the book they expected. Sam came in as she was pouring her second cup of coffee, his face lighting up when he saw her. Morning, sleep okay? Better than I have in years. He crossed to her, hesitant, then seemed to decide something and pulled her into a kiss. I'm glad you stayed. Me too. They had breakfast together, easy and domestic, talking about the day ahead. Sam had fence repairs scheduled. Maggie planned to drive out to interview another rancher Rose had connected her with. Normal everyday plans, except everything felt different now, charged with new possibility. As Maggie was gathering her things to leave, Sam said, come back tonight for dinner. I'll actually cook this time, not just order takeout. You cook. I make a decent pasta, and I've been told my salad is acceptable. Then yes. What time? 7. I'll be here. She drove back to the cabin in the late morning sunshine, feeling lighter than she had in months. The interview with Rebecca Walsh, a sheep rancher in her 70s, was scheduled for 2 o'clock, giving Maggie time to shower change and review her questions. But when she opened her laptop, she found herself pulled to the new document she'd been working on. Not the romance novel she was supposed to be writing, but something else. A story about a woman who'd lost faith in love and a man who'd lost his love finding each other in the wilderness. It was too close to her own life to be fiction, too honest to be the polished fantasy her publisher expected. But the words flowed anyway, and Maggie wrote for an hour, losing herself in the story and the emotional truth of it. Her phone rang. The publisher. Maggie let it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to explain that the book they'd contracted for wasn't the book she was writing, that she might never write that kind of book again. The interview with Rebecca went well, another strong, innovative woman making her mark in a traditional industry. Rebecca had inherited her family's sheep operation at 68 when her brother died, and she transformed it into a fiber cooperative that connected small producers directly with textile artists. People thought I was crazy, Rebecca said as they walked her property, too old to take on something this big. But you know what I learned? It's never too late to try something new. Might fail, might succeed, but at least you tried. The words echoed in Maggie's mind as she drove back towards Sam's ranch that evening. It's never too late to try something new. She'd spent 10 years playing it safe, writing the same stories, avoiding risk. What if she took a chance? What if she wrote the book she actually wanted to write regardless of what the market wanted, what her publisher expected, what her readers might think? What if she let herself be honest, even if it meant failure? Sam greeted her at the door with flour on his shirt and a sheepish grin. I may have been overly ambitious with the fresh pasta. The kitchen was a disaster, pots everywhere, flour coating every surface, what looked like a tempted fettuccine hanging over a chair back to dry. But the smell was amazing, garlic and herbs, and something rich simmering on the stove. Can I help? Maggie asked, trying not to laugh. You can keep me company while I attempt to salvage this. And maybe open that wine. He nodded toward a bottle of red on the counter. They worked together in the warm kitchen, Sam cooking, while Maggie set the table, poured wine, and listened to him narrate his culinary disasters. It was domestic and comfortable, and everything Maggie had thought she didn't want anymore. Except she did want it. She wanted exactly this. Dinner was slightly overcooked but delicious, and they ate by candlelight, talking about everything and nothing. Halfway through the meal, Sam's expression grew more serious. I got a call today from the developer who's been trying to buy my land. Maggie's stomach tightened, and he raised his offer significantly, enough that I could pay off all my debts, buy a smaller place outright, and still have money left over. Are you going to take it? I don't know. Part of me says, yes, be practical, admit defeat, move on. But another part, he stared into his wine glass. This ranch was supposed to prove something. That I could do something real, something that mattered beyond profit margins and stock prices. If I sell because it got hard, what does that prove? That I'm still just a rich man who quits when he can't buy his way out of problems. Or it proves you're smart enough to know when to adjust your strategy. Sam, there's no shame in pivoting when circumstances change. That's not quitting, that's adapting. You sound like my wife. She always said my pride would be my downfall. Smart woman. He smiled, sad but genuine. She was. God, she'd have liked you. You're both practical in ways I'm not. Both willing to call me on my bullshit. It's a gift. They finished dinner and moved to the living room where Sam built another fire. They settled on the couch, together, Maggie tucked against his side, and she found herself telling him about the book she was actually writing. It's too personal to publish, she said. Too raw. My readers expect escapism, fantasy, guaranteed happy endings. This is messy, real. I don't even know if it has a happy ending yet. Does it need one? For it to sell, yes. For it to be honest, I don't know. Sam was quiet for a moment, then said, when I started the company, everyone told me I needed a clear business plan, a guaranteed market proof of concept. But some of the best things we did came from taking risks on ideas that didn't make sense on paper. Sometimes the messy, uncertain stuff is what resonates most. You're saying I should write the messy book. I'm saying you should write the true book, whatever that looks like. Maggie tilted her head up to look at him. When did you get so wise? 65 years of making mistakes. He kissed her forehead. Stay again tonight. I need to get some work done tomorrow. I should probably go back to the cabin, be responsible. Okay, but can I ask you something first? Of course. He took a breath, seemed to gather his courage. What is this between us? I know it's fast, and I don't want to pressure you, but I also don't want to misread the situation. Are we just enjoying each other's company, or are we building towards something? The directness should have scared her. Instead, it felt like relief. I think we're building towards something, Maggie said carefully. I'm not ready to put labels on it or make promises about the future. But this isn't casual for me. You're not casual for me. Good, because you're not casual for me either. He pulled her closer. I know we're both scared. I know we're both carrying wounds, but I want to try this, Maggie. Really try, see where it goes. Even though I'm leaving eventually, even though I live in New York and you live here, we'll figure it out. If this is real and it feels real to me, we'll find a way. Maggie kissed him soft and slow, pouring everything she couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. I should go before I change my mind about staying. Rain check for tomorrow night. It's a date. The next week fell into a rhythm. Mornings at Sam's ranch, writing and working and learning. Days spent on interviews, research, and writing, both the book she was supposed to be writing and the one she actually was. Evenings back at Sam's place, or sometimes at the cabin, cooking together, talking slowly, building something that felt increasingly like a relationship. Maggie's agent called again, then her publisher. She let both go to voicemail, not ready to explain, not willing to lie. The deadline loomed 6 weeks until the manuscript was due, but she couldn't bring herself to care about writing the expected romance novel when she was living something far more complicated and real. On Thursday of the second week, Maggie was in town having lunch at Rose's Cafe when she overheard a conversation at the next booth. Did you see the article in the Billings Gazette about Mitchell Energy's former CEO buying that ranch near here? Maggie's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Sam Mitchell. I heard rumors he had money, but I didn't realize he was that Sam Mitchell. Sold his company for what, $3 billion? Something like that. Makes you wonder why he's pretending to be a struggling rancher. Maybe he's one of those eccentric rich people. You know, wanting to prove he can rough it. Roughing it with $1 billion safety net. Must be nice. Maggie's stomach turned. She pulled out her phone and Googled but Mitchell Energy CEO sale. The results were immediate and extensive. Samuel James Mitchell, 65, sold Mitchell Energy Corporation to Consolidated Power for $3.2 billion in 2022. The article included photos Sam in a suit at press conferences, Sam shaking hands with politicians, Sam accepting awards for business innovation. He hadn't lied exactly. He'd told her he was a former CEO, that he'd sold the company, that he had more money than he needed. But seeing it in black and white, seeing the scale of his former life, made it suddenly starkly real. $3.2 billion. And he was letting his ranch struggle rather than use any of it. Maggie drove back to the cabin in a daze, her mind spinning. Why hadn't he been more explicit about the scope of his wealth? Why was he so determined to let the ranch fail, rather than access resources that could easily save it? Was it principle or pride, authenticity or performance? Her phone rang. Sam. Hey, he said, warmth in his voice. I was thinking we could try that new hiking trail tomorrow. The one up to Mirror Lake. Weather's supposed to be perfect. Sam, did you see the article in the Billings Gazette? Silence. Then no, what article about you, about Mitchell Energy, about the sale price? More silence. Ah, so everyone knows now. Were you ever going to tell me the whole truth? That you're not just wealthy, you're billionaire wealthy. I told you I sold the company for more than I'd ever need. $3.2 billion to Sam, that's not more than you need. That's obscene wealth. And you're up here playing rancher while letting the operation struggle because of some misguided idea about proving yourself. Do you have any idea how that looks? She heard him sigh. Can we talk about this in person, please? I'll be there in 20 minutes. She made the drive in tense silence, her emotions swinging between anger and confusion. When she pulled up to Sam's place, he was waiting on the porch looking miserable. I'm sorry, he said immediately. You're right. I should have been more explicit about the numbers. I hate talking about it. I hate what it makes people think about me. What does it make people think? That I'm a rich guy playing cowboy? That this is all a game to me? That I can just throw money at problems whenever I want? And none of that is true, but once people know the number, that's all they see. Maggie climbed the porch steps, stopping a few feet from him. I don't see you that way, but I am confused about why you won't use any of it to save something you clearly care about. Because if I do, then everyone's right. This is just a vanity project, a rich man's hobby. His hands clenched and unclenched. I need to know I can build something on my own merit, not just buy success with money I made in another life. That's pride, Sam, and it's going to cost you something you love. I know, but I don't know how to separate pride from principle. How do I know the difference between stubborn and principled? Maggie softened slightly. I think principle is about values. Stubbornness is about ego. Principle asks, is this right? Stubbornness asks, can I prove I'm right? He sat down heavily on the porch steps. You're probably right. My wife would have said the same thing. She always told me I cared too much about proving myself and not enough about just living. Maggie sat beside him, not quite touching. Sam, I get it. I really do. I've spent 10 years trying to prove I could be successful on my own, that I didn't need Richard, that I could build a career without him. But at some point, proving yourself becomes its own prison. You're so focused on the principle that you forget the purpose, which is to build a life you actually want to live. Is the ranch really what you want, or is it just what you think you should want? The question hung between them. Sam stared out at his property, the barn, the pastures, the mountains beyond. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I don't know anymore. I thought I wanted this. The simplicity, the connection to the land, the physical work. And I do most days. But I also wonder if I came here to build something or to hide from something. Maybe both. Maybe. He turned to look at her. Are you angry about the money? I'm not angry about the money. I'm frustrated that you weren't more forthcoming. And I'm concerned that you're willing to sacrifice something real because of pride. Fair. He reached for her hand, hesitant. I promise no more secrets. No more omissions. If you want to know something, ask, and I'll tell you the full truth. Okay. Then here's what I want to know. What do you really want? Not what you think you should want, not what proves a point. What actually makes you happy? Sam was quiet for a long time. You, he finally said. These past 2 weeks, the time we've spent together, that's made me happier than anything in 3 years. Maybe longer. The ranch is important, but it's also just a place. You're a person I'm falling in love with. Maggie's breath caught. Sam, I know it's fast. I know we're both scared, but I also know that I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep grateful you exist. And if the ranch fails but I have you, I'll survive that. But if I lose you because I was too stubborn to be honest, I won't. She looked at this man who'd been a stranger 3 weeks ago and was now somehow essential to her daily happiness. She thought about the risk of loving again, of trusting again. She thought about her publisher, waiting for a book she couldn't write, her agent's increasingly frantic calls, her life back in New York that felt increasingly like someone else's. And she thought about what Rebecca had said, it's never too late to try something new. I'm falling in love with you too, she said quietly. And it terrifies me, but I want to try anyway. Sam pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. We'll figure it out. The ranch, the money, where we live, all of it. We'll figure it out together. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll let people help, that you won't let pride destroy something good, whether that's the ranch or us or anything else. I promise. Starting now, I'm going to talk to my financial manager about setting up a sustainable funding structure for the ranch, not just throwing money at it, but doing it smartly, creating something that can work long term. Good. They sat together on the porch as the afternoon faded toward evening, talking through possibilities, making tentative plans. The conversation wasn't finished. There were still questions about logistics, about what a future together might look like, about whether Maggie would stay in Montana, or Sam would come to New York, or they'd find some third option. But for now, it was enough to have named what was growing between them, to have chosen honesty over hiding, to have chosen to try. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the Billings Gazette article. Maggie was at the cabin, attempting to write a response to her publisher's latest increasingly urgent email when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but New York-based. Ms. Thornton, this is Bradley Winters from the New York Times. I'm working on a feature about romance authors, and I'd love to include you. Particularly given your current research project in Montana, our sources say you're working on something quite different from your usual books. Maggie's stomach dropped. I'm sorry, who told you I was in Montana? A colleague saw you listed as a resident at an address here. We always verify information before publication, of course. I was hoping we could discuss your new direction. Perhaps the inspiration you've found. I understand you've been spending time with Samuel Mitchell, the former Mitchell Energy CEO. That's quite a departure from your usual research methods. And the implication was clear. They'd connected the dots, best-selling romance author, former billionaire, CEO, both hiding in Montana. It would make a great human interest story. It would also destroy the privacy both she and Sam had been desperately protecting. I'm going to have to decline the interview, Maggie said carefully. My current project isn't ready for public discussion. I understand, though I should mention we're running the piece with or without your participation. I thought you'd prefer to have your voice included. After she hung up, Maggie sat staring at her phone. They were going to be exposed. Their quiet Montana refuge, the fragile beginning of their relationship, all of it dragged into public view. She called Sam immediately. The New York Times knows, she said without preamble. They're running a feature. About me, about you, about us. They connected the dots. Silence. Then, how much do they know enough That I'm here, that we've been spending time together, that we're both hiding from former careers. When does it run? He didn't say, but soon I'd guess. More silence, pause. I'm sorry, Maggie, this is my fault. If I hadn't been so high profile before, it's not your fault. It's just the reality of who we both are. Were, whatever. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Sam, what do? We could leave, both of us. Find somewhere else to disappear to. That's running. Again. Then we stay. Face it. Let people write what they're going to write and live our lives anyway. Easy to say. Harder to do when you're the subject of public speculation. I know, I lived it for 40 years. But Maggie, if we're going to do this, really do this, we can't base our choices on what other people think or say. We have to decide what's real for us and commit to it regardless. He was right and she knew it. But that didn't make it less terrifying. Can you come over? She asked. I don't want to have this conversation on the phone. I'm already in the truck. He arrived 20 minutes later, and Maggie fell into his arms the moment he stepped through the cabin door. They stood in the small living room holding each other, both scared but together. Tell me what you're thinking, Sam said. I'm thinking that I came here to escape, to figure out who I am without the pressure of expectations and deadlines and performing for an audience. And now the audience is going to find me anyway. So we get ahead of it, control the narrative. How? We decide what we want to say and we say it, on our terms, not theirs. Maggie pulled back to look at him. You want to go public, intentional. I want to stop hiding. There's a difference. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm proud of what we're building. I'm proud of you. Why should we act like we're doing something wrong? Because the internet is vicious. Because people will have opinions about our age difference, our histories, the speed of our relationship. Because they'll tear apart everything we're trying to build. Let them. We know what's real. That's what matters. Maggie wanted to believe him. But she'd spent years cultivating her public image as M.R. Thornton, the romance author who sold hope and happy endings. If people knew she'd stopped believing in her own product, if they knew she was in Montana writing something completely different while dodging her publisher's calls, I need to tell you something, she said, about the book I'm supposed to be writing. Okay. I'm not writing it at all. I mean, I've started it, but it's not the romance novel they contracted for. It's something else entirely. Something personal and messy and probably unpublishable. And my deadline is in 3 weeks, and I have nothing to give them, and I'm going to be in breach of contract, and my career might implode, and... Breathe, Sam said gently. Just breathe. She did, pulling air into her lungs deliberately. Now, he continued, is this personal messy book the one you actually want to write? Yes, but that doesn't matter if it ruins my career. Doesn't it? What's the point of a career that requires you to keep producing work you don't believe in? Income, health insurance, professional identity, all of which you can rebuild. What you can't rebuild is your integrity as an artist. If you compromise that, you lose something essential. You sound very certain for someone who just admitted he doesn't know if he's being principled or stubborn. Sam smiled. Touché, but I'm learning, slowly. He guided her to the couch, sat beside her. Here's what I know, we're both at a crossroads. You with your writing, me with the ranch. We can choose safety, you write the expected book. I sell the land, we both go back to playing roles we've outgrown. Or we can choose authenticity, even if it's scary and uncertain. What if authenticity doesn't pay the bills? Then we figure it out, together. Maggie, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. That's not a romantic declaration, it's just a practical fact. If you need time to write what you actually want to write without worrying about income, I can make that happen. I can't let you support me. Why not? If we're building a life together, why can't we support each other in whatever way makes sense? You've been teaching me about emotional honesty. Let me offer you practical support. It should have felt like dependence, like weakness. Instead, it felt like partnership. I don't know how to accept help, Maggie admitted. Me neither, so we'll learn together. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking through options. By evening, they had a plan. Maggie would call her publisher and agent, be honest about where she was with the contracted book, and propose delivering the personal manuscript instead, with the understanding that they might not want it. Sam would accept the developer's offer for the portion of land that was least productive, use the money to stabilize the ranch operation properly, and let go of his need to prove he could do it entirely alone. Neither choice felt easy, but both felt honest. "There's something else we should talk about," Sam said, as they made dinner together in the cabin's small kitchen. "Long-term logistics. You live in New York, I live here. How does that work?" "I don't know, I've been avoiding thinking about it." "We can't avoid it forever. The article is going to force the conversation anyway." Maggie stirred the pasta sauce, gathering her thoughts. "What if I didn't go back to New York, I mean?" Sam went still. "Are you serious?" "I don't know. Maybe my lease is up in 3 months. I've been month to month on the cabin rental. What if I just stayed, wrote here, lived here, built a life here?" "What about your friends, your support system?" "What support system?" "I have my agent who I've been avoiding, my daughter who's busy with her own life in California, a handful of publishing acquaintances who aren't really friends. I've been so focused on my career that I forgot to build a life." Maggie: "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but when I'm here, I feel like myself in a way I haven't in years. When I'm with you, I feel like I can be honest, that I don't have to perform or pretend or produce, that I can just be." Sam set down the spoon he'd been using, turned her to face him. "If you stay, I need you to promise me it's because you want this life, not just because you want to escape your old one. I don't want it to be your hiding place. I want to be your home." "Well, what's the difference?" "Hiding is about running from something. Home is about running towards something. More no, than something. Towards someone." Maggie considered this. Was she running from or toward? Maybe both. But looking at Sam's face, feeling the warmth of his hands on her shoulders, she thought maybe the toward was stronger. "I can't promise I'm not scared," she said, "or that I won't mess this up, or that living together won't be a disaster. But I can promise that I want to try, that you feel like home to me in a way nowhere else has in a very long time." "Then try. We'll both try, and we'll figure it out as we go." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like hope and tomato sauce, and Maggie thought that this messy, uncertain, terrifying leap into the unknown was the most romantic thing she'd ever done. Far more romantic than anything she'd ever written. The New York Times article ran on Sunday, 3 days later. "Finding Love and Authenticity in Big Sky Country: How Two Refugees from Success Found Each Other in Montana." The piece was surprisingly sympathetic. The reporter had interviewed Rose, who'd spoken glowingly about both of them. He'd talked to Sarah Chen and Martha Jensen, who'd offered careful observations about the genuine connection they'd witnessed. He'd even gotten a quote from the developer, who said Sam had recently agreed to a partial land sale that would preserve the ranch's core operation. But he'd also included speculation about their relationship, questions about whether this was a midlife crisis or genuine transformation, and suggestions that both were running from rather than running toward. The comments section was predictably brutal. "Of course the billionaire found a romance novelist. They're both selling fantasies. Must be nice to find yourself when you have billions in the bank. She's 62, he's 65. Good for them, but let's not pretend this is some great love story. They're just lonely old people with money." Maggie read them once, then closed her laptop. Sam had warned her not to look, but she'd been unable to resist. "How bad?" he asked from the kitchen where he was making breakfast. "About what we expected. People are skeptical, critical, and convinced they understand our lives better than we do." So the internet being the internet. Pretty much. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Her agent, her publisher, 3 different media requests, even her ex-husband Richard calling just to check in, which probably meant he'd seen the article and wanted to comment on her choices. She'd answered none of them except her daughter Lisa, who'd called to say she was happy for her mother, and when could she meet Sam. "You sure about this?" Sam asked, bringing her coffee and eggs. "It's not too late to release a statement saying it's all been exaggerated. And say what we're not actually falling in love, just collaborating on adjacent emotional journeys." "No, we said we'd be honest. This is honest. Even if honest is uncomfortable. Especially then." They ate breakfast in companionable silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows. Outside, the Montana autumn was in full display, Aspen's golden air crisped the kind of perfection that made everything else feel distant and manageable. Maggie's phone buzzed, her publisher. She took a breath and answered. Hi, Gordon. Maggie, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. The Times article, is it true? Are you really in Montana with Sam Mitchell? It's true. Well, that's unexpected, but potentially marketable. We could position the new book as inspired by real events, a romance with authenticity, maybe even a co-writing project. Gordon, I'm not writing the book we contracted for. Silence. Then carefully. What do you mean? I mean the romance novel you're expecting, the one in my usual style. I can't write it. I've tried and I can't. It feels dishonest. Maggie, you have a contract. You have a deadline in 2 weeks. I know, and I'm prepared to breach it if necessary, but I want to offer you something else first. She looked at Sam, who nodded encouragement. I've been writing something different, more personal, more literary. It's a love story, but not the kind I usually write. It's messier, more real, about two people finding each other later in life, both carrying wounds, both scared. I think it's the best thing I've ever written. That's not what we contracted for. I know, but it's what I have. You can read it and decide if you want it, or I can return my advance and we part ways professionally. But I'm not going to keep writing books I don't believe in. More silence. Gordon was clearly conferring with someone, his hand over the phone creating muffled conversation. Finally, send us what you have. We'll read it, but Maggie, I'm going to be honest, if this doesn't work, if it doesn't fit our brand, we may not be able to continue our relationship. I understand, and I appreciate you being willing to look at it. After she hung up, Maggie felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. She'd just potentially ended a 20-year publishing relationship. She'd possibly destroyed her career on a gamble that the personal book was worth more than the commercial one. How do you feel? Sam asked. Like I just jumped off a cliff, and I'm not sure if there's water below or just rocks. But you jumped. I jumped. Proud of you. He pulled her into a hug. Now I have to make my own scary phone call. The developer. The developer. Going to finalize the land sale, make it official. He pulled out his phone, stared at it. This feels like admitting defeat. It's not defeat. It's adaptation. You're keeping the core of the ranch, the parts that matter most to you. You're just letting go of the parts that don't serve the vision. When did you get so wise about my situation? It's easier to see clearly when it's not your own crisis. Sam made the call, negotiating final terms, agreeing to close the following week. When he hung up, he looked both relieved and sad. 40 years ago, I would have seen this as failure, he said, admitting I couldn't do it all myself. And now I see it as choosing what matters. The land I'm selling, it's the northeast corner, poorest grazing farthest from water. I never used it effectively anyway. What I'm keeping is the heart of the place. The creek, the good pasture manures, the barn, the house. Everything that makes this feel like home. That's not failure, that's wisdom. They spent the rest of the day working together, Sam on ranch tasks, Maggie finishing her manuscript. By evening, she had a complete draft of what she was calling The Second Time Around, a title that felt both honest and hopeful. She attached the file to an email to Gordon, wrote a brief cover note explaining the autobiographical elements, and hit send before she could second-guess herself. It's done, she told Sam. How does it feel? Terrifying. Like I just showed someone my diary. That's because you kind of did. He pulled her close. But you showed them your heart too. That takes courage. They made dinner together, ate by firelight, talked about the future in careful, hopeful increments, where they might travel together, whether Maggie would keep the cabin or move into the ranch house, how they'd navigate the inevitable complications of merging two lives built separately over 60 years. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Maggie admitted as they cleaned up. For something to go wrong, for this to fall apart. It might, Sam said honestly. We might fight. We might discover we're incompatible in ways we haven't seen yet. We might hurt each other without meaning to. That's the risk of loving someone. So why do it? Because the alternative is being safe and alone. And I've been there. It's not actually safer. It's just lonelier. That night, lying in Sam's bed with his arm around her and the Montana stars visible through the window, Maggie thought about the stories she'd been telling for 20 years. about the formulaic romances where obstacles were overcome through grand gestures and passionate declarations where love conquered all and happy endings were guaranteed. Real love, she was learning, was quieter than that, more uncertain. It was choosing to be vulnerable despite the risk. It was showing up every day and doing the small, unglamorous work of understanding another person. It was accepting that there were no guarantees, only the commitment to try. She thought that might be a more important story to tell than the fantasies she'd been selling. And for the first time in a decade, she felt like she had something true to say. Gordon called 3 days later. "We want the book," he said without preamble. "It's different from your usual work, and we'll have to position it carefully, but Maggie, it's extraordinary. Raw and honest in ways that will resonate. We're thinking spring release, maybe even hardcover first. This could expand your audience significantly." Maggie had to sit down. "You're serious?" "Completely. There are edits we'll need to discuss, and marketing will want to coordinate with the Times article publicity, but yes, we're in." After she hung up, she sat in stunned silence. They wanted the book. The personal, messy, honest book. The one she'd been afraid was unpublishable. She called Sam immediately. "They want it. They actually want it." His whoop of joy was loud enough that she had to pull the phone away from her ear. "That's amazing, I knew it. I knew you had something special." "I'm terrified." "Of course you are. You just exposed your heart to the world." "But Maggie, this is what authentic work feels like. Scary and vulnerable and worth it." That evening they celebrated at the cabin with cheap champagne and takeout from the Chinese place in town. Rose stopped by with a pie, claiming she just happened to be in the neighborhood, despite living 15 minutes in the opposite direction. "I'm so proud of you both," Rose said, settling into the cabin's ancient armchair like she owned the place. "You came here hiding and look at you now, living out loud. That takes guts." "Or stupidity," Maggie said. "Same thing sometimes." Rose accepted a slice of her own pie. "You know what I've learned in 78 years? The things we regret aren't the risks we took. They're the chances we didn't take because we were too scared of what people might think." After Rose left, Sam said, "She's right, about the regrets. Speaking from experience, so much experience. I spent 40 years building something I thought I was supposed to want. Made a lot of money, got a lot of accolades, impressed a lot of people. But the things I actually treasure, they're all personal. My marriage, the quiet moments, the times I chose connection over achievement." "You're building something different here. On the ranch." "We're building something different here," he corrected. "Together." The next week passed in a blur of activity. The developer closed on the land sale, transferring funds that allowed Sam to pay off his debts and invest in proper equipment. Maggie worked with Gordon on edits, shaping the manuscript into its final form. And together they made plans. Maggie's New York apartment lease ended in 6 weeks. She decided not to renew. Instead, she'd move her essential belongings to Montana, put the rest in storage, and commit to this new life. The decision felt enormous and also completely natural. "You're sure?" Sam asked for the 10th time as they discussed logistics. "You don't want to keep a foothold in New York, some escape route." "If I keep an escape route, I'll be tempted to use it when things get hard. I want to commit to this. To us. Fully. What if we drive each other crazy? Then we'll figure it out. Together. That's what commitment means, right? Not that it'll be perfect, but that we'll stay and work through the imperfect parts." Lisa called to say she'd be visiting for Thanksgiving. "I want to meet this man who's made you so happy and also give him the protective daughter speech about treating you right. He's 65, honey. I think he's past the age where he needs to be threatened by my adult daughter. You'd be surprised. I can be very intimidating when I want to be." The article's publicity brought unexpected opportunities. A podcast about midlife reinvention wanted to interview them both. A literary magazine asked Maggie to write an essay about finding her voice. Even Sam's former company reached out wanting to feature him in their newsletter about Where Are They Now alumni profiles. They declined most of it, accepting only the opportunities that felt aligned with their values rather than just feeding publicity machines. "We're not performing our relationship for an audience," Sam said firmly. "We're living it. If people want to watch, fine, but we're not changing how we do things to make it more marketable." October deepened into November. The aspens lost their leaves, revealing the bare bones of the landscape. The first snow came early one morning, dusting everything white and making the ranch look like something from a postcard. Maggie stood at the window of what was now their bedroom. She'd officially moved into the ranch house 2 weeks earlier, watching Sam in the corral working with a young horse, both of them breathing clouds into the cold air. She thought about the woman who'd arrived in Montana 10 weeks ago, scared, blocked, running from a career she didn't believe in anymore. That woman had been convinced love was a lie she'd been selling, that she'd never trust anyone enough to try again. This woman, the one standing here in wool socks and Sam's borrowed flannel shirt, watching snow fall on Montana mountains, knew different. Love wasn't a lie, it was just more complicated and less guaranteed than the book suggested. Love was choosing to be vulnerable with someone who might hurt you. Love was showing up even when you were scared. Love was learning someone's rhythms and quirks and wounds and choosing them anyway. Love was Sam coming in from the cold and kissing her snow-dusted hair and asking if she wanted coffee. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Her phone rang. Her agent. "Maggie, I've got interest from 3 more publishers wanting to see your next book. Everyone's talking about the Times piece and the authenticity angle. You're having a moment." "I'm not writing to have a moment. I'm writing what feels true." "I know, but the market is responding. Just wanted you to be aware of the opportunities." After she hung up, Maggie thought about opportunities. She'd spent 20 years chasing them, building a career on being commercially viable. Now she had the chance to do something different, to write for truth, rather than trend, for resonance, rather than revenue. It felt like freedom. Sam found her still standing at the window, lost in thought. "You okay?" "Better than okay. I was just thinking about how much has changed." "Regret, not a single one." She turned to face him fully. "I came here to hide. You gave me a reason to stop hiding, to live out loud, to try." "We gave each other reasons," Sam corrected. "I was hiding too. From grief, from expectations, from the pressure to be who I'd been instead of figuring out who I wanted to be. You helped me see that I don't have to choose between who I was and who I am. I can be both. Integrate rather than discard. We're both works in progress. Best kind of people to love. More interesting than the finished versions." They stood together in the warm house while snow fell outside, and Maggie thought about the ending she'd written for her book. The one where her characters didn't ride off into a guaranteed sunset, but instead chose each other, despite uncertainty, committing to building a life one imperfect day at a time. It wasn't a traditional romance ending, but it was an honest one. And honest, she was learning, was more valuable than perfect. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear. Lisa flew into Billings, rented a car, and drove to the ranch with the kind of determined purpose Maggie recognized from her own personality. Her daughter, 40 years old, successful architect, recently divorced herself, emerged from the barn looking simultaneously excited and protective. "So this is Montana," Lisa said, taking in the mountains, the ranch, the big sky. "This is Montana. And where's the billionaire cowboy I'm supposed to vet?" "He's in the barn, finishing chores. He'll be up in a few minutes." Maggie studied her daughter. "You don't have to threaten him, you know. He's good to me." "I know he is. You sound happy when we talk." "Actually happy, not performance happy. But I still want to meet him. Make sure he knows you're valuable." "I think he knows." Sam appeared right on cue, brushing hay from his jacket, his face lighting up when he saw them. He approached with the same careful courtesy he'd shown Maggie that first day on the roadside, respectful, genuine, no performance. "You must be Lisa," he said, offering his hand. "I've heard wonderful things. And you must be the man who made my mother sell her New York apartment and move to the middle of nowhere." "That was her choice. I just gave her a reason to want to stay." Lisa studied him with assessing eyes, then smiled. "Good answer, and thank you for making her happy. She deserves it." The weekend passed in easy companionship. They cooked Thanksgiving dinner together, turkey from a local farm, vegetables from the last of the ranch garden, pie from Rose, who'd insisted on contributing. Lisa regaled them with stories of her own recent dating disasters, making them all laugh until they couldn't breathe. "It's weird seeing you like this," Lisa said to Maggie over coffee Friday morning. Sam had gone out to check cattle, giving them time alone. "So relaxed. You were always so driven in New York. Always working, always stressed." "I was hiding in my work, using it to avoid dealing with the fact that I was lonely and scared and didn't know how to trust anyone after your father. He really did a number on you, didn't he? He did. But I also let it define me for too long. Used it as an excuse not to risk getting hurt again. And Sam is worth the risk. He is, not because he's perfect or because I'm certain it'll last forever, but because he sees me, really sees me. The scared parts and the ambitious parts and the parts that don't quite fit together. And he loves all of it anyway. Lisa reached across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. That's all I wanted. For you to be seen and loved for who you actually are. I think that's what we all want. Speaking of which, Lisa hesitated, then continued. I've been seeing someone too. It's new only a few weeks, but it feels different. Better. I think watching you take this chance made me realize I could too. Tell me about them. They talked for an hour about Lisa's new relationship, about the fears and hopes, about what it meant to try again after divorce. When Sam returned, stamping snow from his boots, he found them laughing over some shared memory from Lisa's childhood. I like her, he told Maggie later after Lisa had gone to bed in the guest room. She's direct. Like you. That's genetic and years of therapy. Good combination. They were in bed, Maggie curled against Sam's side when he said, I've been thinking about something. Dangerous activity. Probably, but I want to ask you something and I need you to be honest. Maggie propped herself up on one elbow. Okay. Are you happy here? Really happy? Not just happy because it's different from New York or because you're in love but genuinely satisfied with this life. Where is this coming from? I just want to make sure you're not sacrificing too much. You had a whole life in New York, a career, a routine, a world you'd built, and you gave it up for Montana. For me. I don't want you to wake up in a year and resent what you lost. Maggie thought about how to answer honestly. I miss some things. Good bagels, theater, the energy of the city. But Sam, I don't miss the life I was living. The constant pressure, the performance, the loneliness disguised as a busy social calendar. Here, I wake up and write because I want to, not because there's a deadline. I ride with you in the mornings, and it feeds something in my soul that was starving in New York. I have time to think, to figure out who I am without all the external noise. But what about community friends? I'm making friends. Rose, Sarah, Martha. And I have you. That's more genuine connection than I had in 20 years in Manhattan. You're sure? I'm sure, she kissed him gently. Stop worrying that I'm going to wake up and regret choosing you. I won't. You're the best choice I've made in a decade. Second best, Sam corrected. What's first? Choosing to write what's true instead of what sells. That took more courage than loving me. She laughed. Maybe they're equally courageous. Maybe they're the same choice. Truth in work, truth in love. Both require the same kind of bravery. They fell asleep twined together, and Maggie dreamed of aspens turning gold and horses breathing clouds into winter air in a life that felt earned rather than expected. December brought deeper cold and decisions about the future. Sam's ranch stabilization was complete equipment, purchased debts, cleared a sustainable operating budget established. He'd hired a part-time hand, a young man named Jake, who was learning the trade and grateful for the work. It meant Sam had more time for other things, for Maggie, for building their life together. Maggie's book was in final edits scheduled for April release. Gordon wanted her to do a small tour bookstores in Montana, Colorado, Wyoming. Regional focus, he called it, leaning into the setting and the authenticity. They were discussing the tour over dinner when Sam said, "What if we made it more than a book tour?" "What do you mean? What if we combined it with, I don't know, visiting places together, seeing the West, making it an adventure rather than just a business trip? Like a honeymoon." The word hung between them. They hadn't talked about marriage, hadn't even used the word. They'd been dancing around it, implying commitment without making it formal. "Is that what you want?" Sam asked carefully. "Marriage. I don't know, my first one ended badly. I'm not sure I need the legal structure to know this is real. But I also think about what we're building, about the ranch being yours legally and how that affects our partnership, about what happens if something happens to one of us. Practical things. Romantic. I'm a romance writer. I know the difference between romance and reality. Romance is grand gestures. Reality is estate planning. Sam laughed. You're not wrong. My financial advisor has been asking about beneficiaries and powers of attorney. Very unromantic questions that require romantic answers. So what do we do? We could get married. Simple ceremony, practical reasons. Make the legal stuff straightforward. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. Good thing you're not looking for romance, just reality. They stared at each other, then both started laughing. We're terrible at this, Maggie said. The worst, but also, Sam sobered, took her hand. Also, I love you. And I want to build a life with you that's legally recognized and protected. I want you to have claim to this place we're creating together. I want it to be ours, not mine, with you as a guest. Does that make sense? Yes. So, will you marry me? Not because it's romantic, though I do think you are the most remarkable woman I've ever met, but because it's practical and also because I want to wake up every day knowing you're my wife, my partner, my person. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. That's actually more romantic than you think. Is that a yes? That's a yes. They sealed it with a kiss, and Maggie thought about the stories she'd written over the years. The dramatic proposals, the grand gestures, the sweep you off your feet moments. None of them had captured this, the quiet certainty of choosing someone, the practical romance of building a shared life, the revolutionary act of promising to try. They married on a Wednesday in January at the ranch with Lisa and Rose and a handful of friends as witnesses. The ceremony was simple. A local judge vows they'd written themselves rings they'd chosen together from a jeweler in Billings. Sam's vows, I promise to be honest even when it's hard, to listen even when I think I know better, to choose you every day for as long as we both shall live. Maggie's vows. I promise to trust you with my heart even though it scares me, to build this life with you as an equal partner, to love you not despite your flaws but including them because they're part of who you are. Simple. True. Theirs. Rose cried. Lisa cried. Even Jake, the ranch hand who'd known them barely 2 months, teared up. They celebrated with dinner at the house, a mix of homemade and catered family style, everyone crowded around the table talking and laughing. It felt right, this small gathering of people who actually knew them, who'd seen them build something real. That night, lying in bed as husband and wife, Maggie said, I can't believe I'm married again. Having regrets already? No regrets, just surprise. I spent 10 years sure I'd never do this again. And here I am. Here we are. Here we are. They were quiet for a moment, then Sam said, I have something for you, a wedding present. He got up, retrieved a folder from his desk, brought it back to bed. Remember how I sold that land to the developer? Of course, Raybone. Well, I used part of the proceeds for the ranch, but part of it I invested in you. He opened the folder. Inside were incorporation papers for a writing retreat, the Thornton Mitchell Foundation for Authentic Voices in Literature. Maggie stared at the documents. What is this? It's a nonprofit to support writers who want to take risks, write truthfully, maybe not follow commercial formulas. We'll offer residencies here on the ranch space and time for people to create without pressure. You'll run it, curate it, shape it however you want. Sam, this is, it's an investment in the kind of work you believe in, the kind of work you're creating. I thought if we're building a life together, it should include space for your vision, not just my ranch dreams. Maggie felt tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears, overwhelmed, grateful, seen tears. This is the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me. You've taught me that supporting each other's dreams is what partnership looks like. I want to support yours. She kissed him deep and grateful, and they made love with the tenderness of people who knew they had time, who weren't rushing toward anything except the quiet building of a shared life. Spring came to Montana with the usual drama, mud season, followed by sudden blooms, the return of migratory birds, calves being born in the pastures. The ranch came alive in ways Maggie was only now, after a full cycle of seasons, beginning to understand. Her book released in April to better reviews than she'd dared hope for. Thornton strips away the fantasy to reveal something more precious, the genuine possibility of connection at any age. New York Times Book Review. A departure from her usual work, but a welcome one. Authentic, moving proof that real love is messier and more meaningful than fictional romance. Publishers Weekly. M.R. Thornton has found her true voice. We're all lucky to hear it. Literary Hub sales were modest compared to her previous bestsellers, but steady. The readers who found it loved it deeply. Letters arrived from women in their 60s who'd given up on love, from recent divorcees, finding hope from people who'd felt seen in the story's honest depiction of fear and courage. One letter came from Richard, her ex-husband. Dear Maggie, I read your book. I recognize parts of our story in it, and I want you to know that I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I blamed you for my own choices, my own cowardice. I've spent 10 years in therapy figuring that out. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that you weren't cold, or madam, you weren't the problem. I was just too immature to handle a woman as capable and complete as you were. I'm glad you found Sam. You deserve someone who sees your strength as a gift rather than a threat. With respect, Richard Maggie showed it to Sam, who read it carefully, then said, How do you feel about it? Surprisingly okay. It's validating, but also, it doesn't change anything. I've moved past needing his approval or his apology, but it's nice to have it anyway. Are you going to respond? Maybe. Something brief. Thank you for the honesty. I hope you found your own peace. Something like that. Generous of you. Not really. I'm just happy enough that his unhappiness doesn't matter anymore. That's not generosity. That's healing. The first writing retreat residents arrived in May, 4 writers all working on difficult personal projects they'd been told weren't commercial enough. Maggie worked with each of them, offering space and encouragement and the kind of honest feedback she'd craved during her own creative crisis. Watching them transform over their month-long stay, seeing confidence grow, and authentic voices emerge felt more rewarding than any bestseller list placement. You're good at this, Sam observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, nurturing other people's creativity. I spent 20 years focused on my own career. It's nice to invest in others for a change. It's more than nice. It's purposeful. You're building something that'll outlast you. She leaned against him, grateful for the solid warmth of his presence. We're building something that'll outlast us. The ranch, the foundation, the life we're creating. Legacy isn't just biological. No, it's not. They sat in comfortable silence, and Maggie thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Block scared, convinced she'd never write anything true again, never trust anyone enough to love them. That woman would barely recognize this life. The ranch house she now called home. The husband beside her in term. The work she was doing that fed her soul rather than just her bank account. The peace she'd found in Montana's big sky and bigger silences. What are you thinking? Sam asked. That I'm happy, genuinely deeply happy. And it's not because everything is perfect. It's because everything is real. Good real or bad real. The best kind of real, the kind where you know exactly where you stand, who you're standing with, and why it matters. I'll take that kind of real any day. Me too. They watched the sun complete its descent, the sky transitioning from gold to purple to deep blue. Stars began to emerge one by one until the night was full of them, more stars than Maggie had ever seen in New York, more possibility than she'd thought existed. You know what I realized, Maggie said. What's that? I spent 20 years writing about happy endings, guaranteed ones, the kind where everything works out perfectly and love conquers all obstacles. But I never actually believed in them. I was selling something I'd lost faith in. And now I think I understand happy endings differently. They're not about perfection or guarantees. They're about choosing to keep trying, about waking up each day and deciding to love someone despite knowing it might not last forever, about building something meaningful in the time you have. That's a lot less certain than your old endings, but it's more true, and I'd rather have true than certain. Sam pulled her closer. Good, because I can't promise you certain, but I can promise you true, and every day, for as long as we get. That's all I need. They stayed on the porch until the cold drove them inside, and even then they sat by the fire talking about everything and nothing, planning the summer and the next retreat and the small, unglamorous details of a shared life. This, Maggie thought, was the story she'd been trying to write all along. Not the dramatic romance with guaranteed outcomes, but the real one. The one where two wounded people chose to try despite their scars. The one where love wasn't a solution to all problems, but a commitment to facing problems together. The one where the ending wasn't certain, but the trying was worth it anyway. 1 year later, the aspen trees were turning gold again, marking the passage of a full year since Maggie's car had broken down on a Montana road, and Sam had stopped to help. So much had changed. The ranch was thriving under Sam and Jake's partnership. The Writing Foundation had hosted 3 successful cohorts of residents, with a 4th scheduled for spring. Maggie's book had won a literary award, bringing more attention to her new direction. Lisa had gotten engaged and was planning a wedding at the ranch for next summer. And Sam and Maggie had built a life that felt impossibly even better than that first year's promise. They stood on the same overlook where Sam had first told her about his past, watching the canyon catch the afternoon light. This time, they weren't on horseback they'd hiked in, taking their time stopping to identify wildflowers and watch a golden eagle soar overhead. "I have something to tell you," Maggie said. Sam's expression grew concerned. "Good something or bad something?" "Good, I think. I'm writing a new book." "That's wonderful. What kind?" "A sequel to the second time around." "There's a sequel to our story." "No, this one's fictional, but it's inspired by us. By what we've learned about love at this age, at this stage of life. About how the real work begins after the happy ending, when you're actually building a life together." That's either very meta or very recursive. Probably both, but I want to explore it. What happens after two people commit to each other? The everyday negotiations, the small joys, the challenges of merging lives built separately. All the stuff that romance novels usually skip over. That sounds hard. It will be, but also honest. And I think people need to see that loving someone long-term is a skill, not just an emotion. Something you practice and improve at, and sometimes fail at, and keep trying anyway. Sam pulled her into a hug. "Write it. The world needs more honesty about love." "What about you? Any new projects?" "Actually, yes. Jake and I are talking about starting a training program for at-risk youth. Equine therapy ranch skills, giving kids who need a chance the opportunity to learn something meaningful. It's ambitious, but I think we could do it." "That's beautiful." "We contain multitudes," Sam quoted. "Neither of us has to be just one thing." They stood together as the sun began its descent, and Maggie marveled at how different this felt from a year ago. Then they'd been discovering each other, tentative and scared. Now they knew each other's rhythms. Sam's morning grumpiness before coffee. Maggie's need for an hour of quiet writing time before she could be social. His tendency to overthink decisions. Her habit of avoiding conflict until it exploded. They'd learned to navigate each other's quirks and wounds. They'd had fights and makeups and the thousand small negotiations of shared life. They discovered that love wasn't the absence of conflict, but the commitment to work through it. "Thank you," Maggie said. "For what?" "For stopping that day, for helping me, for seeing me, for loving me enough to let me be messy and uncertain and still figuring things out. Thank you for taking the risk, for staying, for building this with me." They kissed as the sun touched the horizon, and somewhere in the canyon below, a coyote called to the emerging stars. This was the story Maggie had been trying to write all along. Not a fantasy of perfect love, but the real thing. Complicated and uncertain, and absolutely worth it. The kind of love that didn't conquer all obstacles, but gave you a partner to face them with. The kind that didn't promise forever, but made every day count. The kind that was messy and imperfect and more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. Some love stories begin with fireworks, she thought. Theirs had begun with a broken-down car and a cowboy with kind eyes. It had grown through honest conversations and shared vulnerabilities. It had deepened through choosing each other day after day, despite the fear. And it would continue not because happy endings were guaranteed, but because both of them kept showing up, kept trying, kept believing that the work of loving someone was the most important work there was. As they walked back toward the ranch in the fading light, hands intertwined, Maggie thought about the last line of her new book, the one she'd written that morning. The best love stories don't end. They evolve, they grow, they change with the seasons and the years and the people living them. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who's willing to evolve with you to change and grow and keep choosing you, even when you're both different people than you were at the start, Well, that's not just a happy ending. That's a beginning that keeps beginning over and over as long as you both draw breath. Sam squeezed her hand and she squeezed back. Beginning again, every day, together. Thank you for joining Sam and Maggie on their journey of healing, honesty, and second chances. Their story reminds us that it's never too late to start over, to open your heart again to build something real. If this story resonated with you, please consider leaving a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced a second chance at love? What did you learn from starting over? For more stories about authentic love, emotional healing, and the courage to be vulnerable, please subscribe. New stories every week. Remember, the best chapters of your life might still be unwritten. Your heart might still have room for one more great love. And it's never ever too late to choose honesty over performance, authenticity over perfection, and real connection over safe isolation. Thank you for reading. May you find your own Montana, whether it's a place or a person, or simply the courage to be yourself. With gratitude, your storyteller.